friends, and welcome back. I'm so excited to get back into filming videos and talking to you guys about books. If you saw my last video, you'll know that I'm going to be concentrating on some book reviews where I'll also be making something that's kind of associated with the story. Today I'm going to be reviewing A Curse of Hope and Shadows. A Curse of Hope and Shadows is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and our beast has been cursed. And his father has tried to break the curse, and as a result of that, he's kind of in an in-between state. So like half of his face is a monster, and the other half is like normal people. To honor that, I'm going to be making half moon cookies. So we're going to start with our dry ingredients. I'm going to do 3 3/4 cup of flour to start. So in our Beauty and the Beast retelling, our beast, Dimitri, is a young man and obviously very angry. He keeps himself solitary so he doesn't have to look at anybody. He doesn't have visitors to his castle. And is just kind of like a grumpy human being. And he's a young man. I think in the story it says he's 17. So basically a baby in my mind. His father has basically abandoned him. He never gets to see his father, partially because I think Dad's resentful. Also, he has been trying to end the curse and has failed. So I think there's probably also a little bit of guilt involved in that and like failure. But he's, you know, Dad sounds like he's kind of a jerk. In the beginning of the story, we meet Adeline, and Adeline is poor. And she is the sole source of income, basically, for her family, her younger siblings. Like, there's like 4 other younger siblings. And so she's meeting for a job interview, basically, to become Dimitri, the Beast's personal maid and companion. The housekeeper is trying to hire a young lady to kind of bring him out of his funk. And she goes in an interview. He's gone through a lot of these ladies because they basically take one look at him and they either run away in fear, or he's so horribly unpleasant that they just can't stand to be around him anymore. Into the flour, I'm going to be putting 3/4 teaspoon of baking powder and 2 teaspoons of baking soda. So Adelaide goes to interview for this job. And she's just like, I don't care what this guy throws at me. He's nothing compared to what I've had to go through. She's done some nursing, and she's also lost her parents. So she's pretty much a no-nonsense, I'm not going to put up with any bull crap type of a gal. So she goes in and interviews, and her attitude really strikes the housekeeper. And she really likes how, you know, unflappable she is, and that maybe she may be able to last this guy's grumpy habits. So she's hired, and she meets Dimitri, and he's, of course, unpleasant, as she expects, but she doesn't put up with his bull crap, and so he kind of becomes a little bit intrigued. He kind of starts to open up, and so she learns more about him as a person throughout their interactions with each other. Now I'm going to add 2 1/4 cup of sugar. As she, you know, spends more time with him and brings him out of his shell and doesn't put up with his bull crap, you know, they kind of find a friendship and a good footing. I think I might have made a mistake. So I got so excited talking about the story that I made a mistake. And I added the sugar to the flour, baking powder, and baking soda, and I was not supposed to, so I had to start over. And I'm just going to whisk that together, roll gently. And then I'm going to set that aside and don't add anything else to it. So then I have a new bowl, and to that I'm going to add butter. A lot of butter. 16 tablespoons of softened butter, and I'm going to beat it. I think the last time I used one of these, I was making a recipe from my mom's time. Alright, that looks pretty loose. And then as I'm doing that, I'm going to be adding in some sugar. So I need 2 1/4 cup of sugar. Alright, so where was I? Let me see if I can focus on both of these things at the same time so I don't make any more mistakes. So Adeline and Dimitri grow closer, and then in the process, she kind of starts opening up about her family, the loss of her parents, how she's basically taking care of her siblings, and he kind of starts to become less selfish, I guess, as he starts to learn that other people have lives and problems, and maybe even though he's half monster, essentially, I mean, he's still a duke. He's still rich. He still has staff. He still has a home. He's secure in his dukedom. I don't think there's any possibility that he's going to lose that. And also, he's still very much loved by the staff. At one point, we meet a cousin who obviously cares about him and doesn't treat him any differently. So he kind of starts to get over himself a little bit, which is nice. We do love that character development. But also, she kind of starts to gradually open up to him. And what happens, they start to become a little bit closer. And in your mind, as you're reading, you're like, is this going to be a typical, like, she's going to break the curse because they're going to fall in love? Well, the problem is, she got that sense of propriety because she's so poor and he's so duke. She's like, any feelings that she feels for him beyond the friendship, she's just like, I can't. This is forbidden. This is forbidden. So, of course, what happens inevitably is there's misunderstandings, miscommunications. And, you know, in his mind, that doesn't enter into it. So it's interesting that it enters more into her mind than his. And I think it's because of their age difference. She is older than him and also a little bit more worldly. She's been through a lot. And he, comparatively speaking, even though he has this curse, really hasn't experienced the life woes that she has. So that older, wiser, you know, side of her is saying, this is wrong and I can't feel these feelings for him. Obviously, that gets in the way of any kind of romance for them, that for a really long time, that's that good slow burn. Next to this, I'm going to add 3/4 cup of cocoa powder. I remember when I was a kid, I discovered cocoa powder and didn't know that cocoa powder was not sweet. So I thought, tee hee hee, I'm going to steal this and I'm going to make myself a cocoa. And so I took cocoa powder and put it like directly in milk and was disgusted. All right, it wants it sifted, so let's see if I can do that. If this goes badly, you can say you knew me when. But I'm gonna go ahead and sift out 3/4 cup of cocoa powder into this bad boy. I probably could use a better sifter, then I'd have to find it. I ended up finding the bigger one because it's much, much easier. I am going to beat this at medium speed until it is light and fluffy. To this, I'm going to add eggs and vanilla. So I don't want to get too spoilery about the story because in the end, it's not just about a romance. It is about, you know, learning about each other, seeing your differences through tragedy and overcoming them, as well as not just overcoming them personally, but also being able to appreciate somebody else's. Because Dimitri isn't the only one who has a curse. Adeline is also cursed, and she talks about how she's cursed with the smile. She's always had to be the strong one. She always has to show that everything is okay for her siblings and just to society in general, so she doesn't fall apart. 2 eggs. And these eggs are at room temperature. It is better that you keep your eggs at room temperature before you go to cook. I really like that this isn't just your typical run-of-the-mill Beauty and the Beast retelling. There's a lot more depth and nuance to it than the simple they meet. They, you know, she sees past the beast and then they fall in love. And you know what's interesting is I'm not quite sure what time period this is set in. Maybe I missed it. It kind of feels like you're in some sort of 1800s or earlier, but then they have running water, including Adeline at where she grew up, her little her little house. I'm not quite sure, but because of the social, you know, structure of you're the Duke and you can't marry above your station and all of that, I'm guessing it's at least, I don't know, 19th century. When was indoor plumbing invented? Anyway, so I've got my eggs and vanilla. I am now going to beat this at medium speed until they are combined. This is the funnest part of reading a recipe, so I'm going to the next step, and it calls for salt. But at no point do I see them saying add the salt. I don't know. Do I need the salt? I mean, it's salted butter, but I'm sure I do. So at this point, we are going to start alternating the flour and the milk. We need 1.5 cups of milk. And I guess I'll just put in the salt at this point, since it clearly wants us to have salt. It's only 1/4 teaspoon, so I think I'll be okay. And speed. So starting with the flour, we're going to do alternating flour and milk, and then mixing them until they're combined. This is the part where I always end up making the biggest mess, because I just do. And of course I'm wearing a black t-shirt today. So I'm gonna keep doing this until everything is all combined, and I'll be right back. And that's getting really tough. You can lift, bro. It looks really good. Now we need to use a number 20 scoop, which I don't know what that is. So I'm going to use an ice cream scoop. All right, I've got some cookie sheets over here. I've preheated the oven to 350. I'm going to scoop the dough onto here, and then we need to press it flat using our spatula. I hope these aren't too big, but I also won't get upset if they are. It's very, very sticky. I don't know if it's supposed to be, so we'll see what happens. So what I ended up doing, because it was sticking so bad to the spatula, I even tried to spray it with like cooking spray, was just scoop out some dough, and then I shaped it into a somewhat flattened circle-like shape. Also, these cookies are enormous. While they're baking, we're gonna make some frosting. On to the frosting. We're going to start with a larger bowl, because we're going to make a base frosting that we're then going to divide. This is going to be the vanilla frosting. We're going to start with 6 tablespoons of butter, and we're going to beat it. We're going to add 2 2/3 cup of confectioner's sugar, powdered stuff. So this was the second book that I read from this author, and what I really love is she really puts you in the scenery. Her writing is beautiful, but without being like overly flowery. The descriptions are great. I am right there with them, except me not knowing what time period, but that could just be me not paying attention, which I need to do right now. Sure it'll be fine. Anyway, I'm gonna blend the sugar and the butter together. I'm gonna do a teaspoon of the vanilla extract, and then I've got a 1/3 cup milk that I'm gonna add while I'm blending this. Again, without going into spoilers, I will say the author is brilliant at setting up the next story. She'll resolve some things for you in this first part, which BT dubs, there's a second and third part, but they're in one book. But kind of gives you a little bit of resolution, but then also throws something heartbreaking and awful at you that you can't help it. You have to read the next book, which I haven't yet. I do plan on it. Okay, so I've got this beautiful smooth vanilla frosting. I'm gonna take half of it and put it in a separate bowl. Probably about that. So to this half of the frosting, I'm gonna add a 1/3 cup cocoa powder and then 2 tablespoons of milk and then blend that together. Now this you could lick the spoon on because there's no raw eggs. Okay, we've got our frostings, we've got the chocolate, and we've got the vanilla, our 2 halves. That timer's about to go off. And that's our second batch of cookies. And so once that is done, we'll frost some up. Our cookies are done. I have some that are already cooled down and some of them that are cooling. Yeah, I got some big cookies. So I ended up, because these were ended up being so large, cooking them or baking them for 22 minutes as opposed to 12 minutes. So I'm gonna frost one up so we can see it. My frosting game isn't so good. All right, so I'm gonna do 1/2 vanilla frosting, and then I've got chalky frosting. Bless you, that's my dog. Half moon cookie. We're not done yet. After all that work, I'm just parched. So I'm gonna make something to go with this delicious cookie, and it involves one of my favorite things, gin. I'm using aviation gin for this particular recipe. I take a few ounces of the gin, and I added some activated charcoal to it to give it that dark, dark nighttime look. And I'm gonna get a couple things together, and we're gonna make a cocktail to go with this cookie. Into my cocktail shaker, I'm going to put 1 ounce of lime juice, 4 ounces of pineapple juice, and 2 ounces-ish of the activated charcoal infused gin. Cover and shake until chilled. Chilly. Pour into a chilled martini glass. And now for the coup de grace. Ice spheres. My first time making them. Let's see how she do. It's the full moon. They turned out okay. So one part of the story that you should know is at the full moon, our beast friend turns into more of a beast than he'd already be. That was a mess. I always overpour. You're supposed to top it with club soda, but I somehow found it unnecessary due to my excessive alcohol pour. Cheers! Double cheers. It just tastes like a brownie. Please check out A Curse of Hope and Shadows. You can follow the author on the social medias, which I will link down below. The second volume is already out, so you don't have to wait. If you're interested in historical fantasy, check out my Daughters of Riverstone series. The Rise of Riverstone and The Pride of Riverstone are both currently out. You can find them on my Etsy store. They're also available in Amazon, paperback, and Kindle. You can also get The Rise of Riverstone in hardcover from Amazon or my Etsy shop. The hardcover, The Pride of Riverstone, is coming soon. Thank you for joining me as I make an enormous mess in the kitchen that I make my husband clean up. Come back and see us next time.